If you haven't been living under a rock for the past couple of years, I'm sure that you've at some point heard the name Lin-Manuel Miranda. The 40-year-old composer, lyricist, and actor became a household name after the wild success of his musical Hamilton. However, not as many people know that before Hamilton, Lin had already garnered success from a previous musical, In the Heights. You may have heard the name of the musical because of a certain movie adaptation that was filmed in 2019, the release of which has unfortunately been postponed for obvious reasons. The musical is set over the course of 3 days in the New York City neighborhood of Washington Heights. Home to a Latinx community facing change in the form of gentrification, the characters experience love, loss, and find a sense of pride in their community. I love In the Heights. I love the music, I love the emotions that it evokes, but most of all, I love the characters. My favorite thing about the show is how it is somehow able to develop intensely complex characters and make you care about all of them. Not just the central narrator, not just the handful of main characters, but every single member of the community feels like a real, fleshed-out human being. How was Lin-Manuel Miranda able to do this so effectively? One central theme that the characters interact with in the musical is that of home. What is home? How do you know when you're there? In essence, where are you supposed to be? This is made especially poignant by the fact that the majority of the characters are immigrants or are children of immigrants. This adds to the tension of figuring out where you fit in. In the Heights is able to effectively develop its many characters by having them interact with, and then in turn develop, the central theme of what defines home. Let's start with Usnavi. I'll let him introduce himself.
I am Usnavi, and you probably never heard my name. Reports of my fame are greatly exaggerated, exacerbated by the fact that my syntax is highly complicated, because I immigrated from the single greatest little place in the Caribbean, Dominican Republic. I love it, Jesus, I'm jealous of it, and beyond that, ever since my folks passed on, I haven't gone back. God damn, I gotta get on there.
Usnavi is the central narrator of In the Heights. He runs a bodega in Washington Heights and introduces us to the rest of the cast. As we mentioned, he immigrated from the Dominican Republic as a child, but hasn't returned since his parents died. This is his central goal in the musical, and this goal seems to be in reach after Abuela, his mother figure, wins the lottery at the end of the first act.
Yo, I know just where to go. There's a little beach named Playa Rincon with no roads. You need a rowboat or motorbike to reach this beach. It's just a stone throw from home. My folks is home.
Even at this point, where Usnavi is determined to return to the Dominican Republic, to his home, he qualifies it by calling it his parents' home, foreshadowing the idea that his concept of home might change. However, he and Abuela end the duet by looking forward to their new life together by the sea. Usnavi's idea of home at the beginning of the show can be summed up as, home is my family's home. Let's move on to Abuela Claudia. Essentially the matriarch of Washington Heights, Abuela outlines her story in her solo number, Paciencia y Fe, or Patience and Faith, the mantra of her mother that she continues to practice. Growing up in Havana, Cuba, she discusses the tension she feels between her home there and her new home in New York.
Ay, mama, so many stars in Cuba. In Nueva York, we can't see beyond our street lights. To reach the roof, you gotta bribe the super. Ain't no Cassiopeia in Washington Heights, but ain't no food in La Vibora.
Abuela has lived in Washington Heights for most of her life, even though she dreams of returning to her home. At the emotional climax of the song, she puts the sentiment into words.
And I, mama, what do you do when your dreams come true? I spend my life inheriting dreams from you.
For Abuela, home is where I grew up. So when she wins the lottery, she's finally able to resolve this tension by moving back to her home with Usnavi, except she doesn't. More on that later. Next, let's examine Nina. At the beginning of the musical, Nina Rosario is just returning home from her first year at Stanford University. The daughter of Kevin and Camila Rosario, owners of a cab company, Nina was the shining star of the community, but has to return and explain that she has dropped out of college. In her solo number, titled Breathe, she explains this difficulty.
They are all counting on me to succeed. I am the one who made it out.
Nina's relationship with home doesn't explicitly come into play in this song. Instead, we have to turn to the aptly named number When You're Home, where after being taken on a walk down memory lane by Benny, her old friend and current love interest, Nina reveals her internal conflict.
When I was younger, I imagined what would happen if my parents had stayed in Puerto Rico. Who would I be if I had never seen Manhattan? If I lived in Puerto Rico with my people, my people. I feel like all my life I'm trying to find the answer, working harder, learning Spanish, learning all I can. And I thought I might find the answer at Stanford. I'd stare out at the sea, thinking, where am I supposed to be? So please don't say you're proud of me. I've lost my way.
Like Abuela, Nina longs to return to where she was born, except in this case, it is tied to an identity that she longs to explore. However, after looking for answers at Stanford, she is left with more questions. Does she belong at Stanford, in Puerto Rico, or New York? In a sense, where is home? Even though it seems like she comes to a conclusion at the end of the song, Nina's relationship to the theme of what defines home turns into home is identity. Let's look at one more character. At the beginning of the musical, Vanessa seems very close to getting to where she wants to go. She's moving out of Washington Heights and into downtown Manhattan. As explained by her number It Won't Be Long Now, her idea of home is defined in opposition to Washington Heights.
The elevated train drives everyone insane, but I don't mind, no, no. If I bring back boys, they can't tolerate the noise, and that's okay, 'cause I never let them stay. But one day, I'm hopping that elevated train and I'm riding away, yeah. It won't be long now.
Usnavi, who has a crush on Vanessa, sums up her situation poetically after he finally asks her out on a date through his cousin.
I'm running to make it home, and home's where Vanessa's running away from. I'm running to make it home, and home's where Vanessa's running away from.
We can sum up Vanessa's relationship with home at this point with home is out of Washington Heights. Now that we've set up where all these characters start, let's move back to Abuela. In her duet with Usnavi, they celebrate being able to move to their new home in the Dominican Republic.
Whatever we do, it's you and I.
And that's the last song with Abuela. Just 2 numbers later, it is announced that Abuela Claudia has passed away. Abuela is the one character in the show that doesn't have a complete character arc. She never has another definition of home. She doesn't have any resolution. And that's on purpose. Abuela's story is tragically cut short, and you feel that loss with the characters in the song Alabanza.
Abuela Claudia had simple pleasures. She sang the praises of things we ignore. Glass Coke bottles, breadcrumbs, a sky full of stars. She cherished these things. She'd say, Alabanza. Alabanza means to raise this thing to God's face and to sing quite literally praise to this. When she was here, the path was clear. She was just here. She was just here.
After Abuela's passing, Usnavi is still determined to leave for the Dominican Republic. He holds on to this even in the beginning of the finale.
Abuela really wanted me upon the beach with margaritas in my reach, and soon that's how it's gonna be. Imagine me leaving today on a 747 boarding JFK.
After Abuela dies, Usnavi's idea of home becomes home is where Abuela wanted me to be. Nina goes through a lot in the show, but we don't really have time to get into a lot of the plot surrounding her. Basically, she gets together with Benny, her father doesn't approve, her mother sorts it out, and everything culminates after Abuela passes away, and Nina reflects on Abuela's influence on her in the song Everything I Know.
And our lives are in these boxes, while the woman who held us is gone. But we go on, we grow so If you're up there, I'll make you proud of everything I know.
After the number, Nina talks to her parents and agrees to return to Stanford to finish what she started. Nina wants to make her parents, her community, and ultimately Abuela proud of her. Nina's next step in her journey is home is the people who raised me. Finally, let's return to Vanessa. Right before the end of the show, she brings Usnavi a bottle of champagne for their date. She confronts him about him leaving and asks him to stay.
Vacation, Vanessa, you're leaving too.
I'm going down to West 4th Street. You can take the
What are you trying to say?
I'm leaving the country, and we're never gonna see you.
What are you trying to say? Vanessa, I don't know why you're mad at me.
But she's too late. At this point, Vanessa realizes that while Washington Heights really never was home for her, there will be nothing left now that Usnavi is leaving. Vanessa's mindset at this point is that home is gone. Nina's journey is the first to wrap up. In one last duet before the finale, she and Benny affirm to one another that they will spend this summer together and stay together once she returns to California. Towards the end of the song, she sings this.
Let me take this moment just to say you are gonna change the world someday, and I'll think of you every night at the same time.
Nina's syntax links together home and Benny, showing that she has found home not only in her community, but specifically with Benny. Vanessa still goes forward with her plan to move downtown. In a moment in the finale where a chorus of motifs from the community rises up, reminding Usnavi of all that he's leaving behind, Vanessa joins. Just as Usnavi is packing up to leave, he hears this and is reminded of everything he loves about Washington Heights. But it's not quite enough to make him stay.
There's a breeze off the Hudson, and just when you think you're sick of living here, the memory floods in. The morning light off the fire escapes, the nights in Bennett Park blasting big punt tapes. I'ma miss this place, to tell you the truth. Kevin dispensing wisdom on this dispatch booth, and at dawn, Vanessa at the salon. We gotta move on, and who's gonna notice we're gone?
Usnavi is almost ready to leave, but is stopped when his cousin Sonny and his friend known as Graffiti Pete unveil something special.
He hates it.
He's forming an artistic opinion.
You did this last night?
Yeah.
There goes my flight.
What?
In that moment, Usnavi decides to stay. Because even though home is where Abuela wanted me to be,
If you close your eyes, that hydrant is a beach, that siren is a breeze, that virus keeps a leaf on a palm tree. Well, I'm sorry, but I ain't going back because I'm telling you a story. And I can say goodbye to you smiling. I found my island. I've been on it this whole time. I'm home.
Usnavi realizes that the home he has been looking for the entire time was right in front of him. The best way to honor Abuela is to continue on her legacy in the place where she had the biggest impact, right here in Washington Heights. In a sense, Usnavi's home is this community. Once he announces that he is staying, he also says that he is getting a second date with Vanessa. Vanessa's home may now be downtown, but in a sense, home is just a train ride away. As the community comes together to celebrate, they end the musical with one last proclamation.
I'm home. You hear that music in the air, take the train to the top of the world, and I'm there. I'm home.
In the Heights is an extremely complex show with many themes, and it's impossible to sum up the full impact in one video essay. But one of the reasons why it works so well and is able to juggle its wide breadth of characters is because many of them grapple with the similar question of what is home? As most of the characters in the show interact with the same theme, the writers were able to simultaneously create satisfying arcs for each character in a streamlined manner while also developing a complex idea of what home means. In the end, In the Heights creates a resonant story with a relatable set of characters that everyone can connect to, and invites the audience to join them in the place that they call home.
In Washington Heights.